They told everyone I was missing. The news said, prominent architect David Mercer has mysteriously disappeared. They showed my photo in smiling, calm, successful. But while the world wondered where I'd gone, I was right here, locked behind these walls, drugged into silence, labeled unstable by the very people who once called me Dad. A slow zoom reveals David sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, wearing a thin gown. He stares into the camera, a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. My own children had me committed to a mental hospital, not because I was sick, but because they wanted my money. They bribed doctors, forged papers, and signed my freedom away, and the world believed them. The sound of a television flickers faintly in the background. A news reporter's voice plays, "Authorities are investigating the disappearance of David Mercer, a respected architect from Brookstone County. His family claims he's missing, but why are they accessing his bank accounts?" David turns toward the sound, his jaw tightens. His hands tremble slightly before he steadies them. That was the first time I realized the truth. I wasn't missing, I was erased. Quick montage flashes, hospital corridor lights flickering, a nurse's shadow crossing the hallway, his children's smiling faces on the news screen. Everything I had worked for, my home, my reputation, my fortune, became theirs overnight. My son called it protecting the family legacy. My daughter called it helping me heal. But what they really wanted was control. They had already decided how my story would end. What they didn't know was that I wasn't finished yet. Music shifts, low, pulsing, building tension. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that you ignored every red flag, this story is for you, because betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears your last name. Camera zooms closer to David's eyes. Determination flickers beneath the grief. I'm David Mercer. I was a husband, a father, a man who believed in love and loyalty. But when the people I loved most turned me into a prisoner in my own life, I learned something no one teaches you. Survival isn't just about escaping. It's about remembering who you are when everyone else tries to rewrite you. He stands, walks slowly toward the small window. The reflection of his face overlays the rain outside. They tried to bury me under lies, but the truth doesn't stay quiet forever. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Music swells gently, hinting at hope beyond the pain. So, this is where my story begins, not in an office, not in a courtroom, but in a locked hospital room where I learned the real meaning of freedom. You're about to see how everything they built on greed and deceit started to crumble, one secret at a time. Screen fades to black. Title appears, "My children had me locked away to steal my fortune until the world found out the truth." Before everything fell apart, my life was quiet, peaceful even. After my wife Anna passed away, I promised myself I'd keep things simple. I retired early from architecture, moved back to our family home in Brookstone, and filled my days with the things we once dreamed of doing together: tending the garden, sketching new designs, volunteering at the local library. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Camera pans across photos on the wall. David and Anna smiling at the beach, his children as kids, family birthdays, laughter frozen in time. My children, Ethan and Lila, were my whole world. Ethan was sharp, confident, and always hungry for more. He'd gone into business after college, managing real estate and investments. Lila, my youngest, had her mother's kindness, gentle, artistic, always trying to keep the peace. Every Sunday they'd come by for dinner, and for a few hours, the house felt alive again. Scene, a cozy dinner table, dishes of roast chicken, laughter, clinking glasses. "Dad, you've earned your rest. Let me handle your accounts, your investments. You should enjoy life now." "You're the businessman now, Ethan. I trust you," he laughs, unaware how those words would later haunt him. I thought I was passing the torch, letting my son take the lead, just like any proud father would. I didn't see it as control. I saw it as love. Cut to Lila showing him photos on her phone. I'm thinking of opening a little art studio, Dad. Ethan said he might help with the startup. I'll help too. Your mom would have loved that. He leans back in his chair, smiling. The moment feels perfect, the kind of happiness that makes you believe nothing can go wrong. I told myself I was lucky. 2 beautiful kids, a lifetime of work behind me, enough money saved to live comfortably and maybe leave something meaningful behind. My neighbors would often say, "David, you did it right." And for a while, I believed them. Camera focuses on David trimming roses in his garden, humming softly. His hands are steady, the world around him calm. What I didn't know was that while I was busy preserving memories, my children were already planning my disappearance. But back then, there were no signs, no warning lights, just the easy rhythm of love and trust. A subtle visual contrast, the sunlight fades slightly, and the tone shifts to something more somber. I used to think betrayal came with anger or distance. But sometimes it comes dressed in smiles, in Sunday dinners, in promises that sound too kind to question. Scene shows David sitting in his study, looking at an old architectural sketch titled Mercer Legacy Home. He writes on the corner, "For Ethan and Lila to carry on." That's the thing about comfort. It dulls your instincts. You stop questioning. You stop noticing. And before you realize it, the walls around you aren't holding you safe anymore. They're closing in. Camera pulls back slowly from the study window as the light fades to dusk. I had no idea my perfect little world was built on borrowed trust, and it was about to collapse. Music fades into quiet tension, a low hum, preparing the viewer for the next section. The first red flag. It started small, so small that I almost missed it. One of those moments you brush off because it's easier to believe everything's fine than admit something might be wrong. Looking back now, that was the moment my world started to tilt. Sound of muffled voices from the next room. David walks toward his study door, hearing his son's voice, low and sharp. "Just make sure the signature looks clean. He won't even notice. He trusts me." David pauses. A frown crosses his face. The rain taps harder against the window. He gently pushes the door open a few inches. "Oh, hey, Dad. Didn't see you there." "Who were you talking to?" "The insurance guy. You know how these forms are? Complicated." David nods slowly, trying to read his son's face. "Of course. I'm glad you handle those things better than I do." Ethan laughs lightly, but there's tension beneath it. He pockets his phone and quickly changes the subject. "By the way, Dad, the investment account looks great. We should meet with the bank soon, just to update your signature card. It's routine." Routine. That's what he called it. I didn't think twice. Ethan had always been confident, organized. He reminded me of myself when I was his age. Ambitious, determined, maybe a bit too determined. Cut to David later that night. He's at his desk, flipping through old family albums. The glow of a small lamp casts long shadows across his face. I told myself not to worry. Ethan's a good man, I thought. He's just busy, maybe stressed. But something about that phone call kept echoing in my mind, that tone in his voice, the way his eyes avoided mine. Flashback to earlier. Ethan's quick smile, the way he gripped the phone a little too tightly. There was a time I used to teach him how to read people's expressions. The eyes, I'd say. They tell you what words won't. Funny how I forgot to look closely at his. Scene changes. The next morning. Lila visits, cheerful and bright. She places muffins on the counter. "Ethan says you've been stressed, Dad. You should let him handle everything for a while." "Stressed? He said that?" "He just worries about you. We both do." David forces a smile but looks unsettled. It was such a small thing. A whisper of doubt planted between words that sounded caring. But care shouldn't sound rehearsed. And suddenly I realized how easily trust can become a weapon when used by the wrong hands. Camera lingers on David watching his children drive away through the rain. His hand tightens around a coffee mug. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, something had shifted. For the first time, I wondered if the people I loved most were starting to see me not as their father, but as an opportunity. The rain stops. The fire dies down. Silence fills the house. That was the first red flag, and I let it wave right past me. Music fades into a low hum of tension, signaling the beginning of the next chapter. Emotional erosion. It didn't happen all at once. There was no shouting, no fight, no clear moment when everything broke. It was slower than that, like water dripping on stone, quiet, steady, relentless. Scene cuts to David at the kitchen table. He reaches for his checkbook, but it's missing. He looks confused, then finds a note in Ethan's handwriting. Took care of the bills. Don't worry about this stuff anymore. At first, I was grateful. Ethan said he'd pay the bills, manage the accounts, handle the investments. You've worked enough, Dad, he'd say. Let me take care of it. It sounded loving, until I realized I didn't know what I actually owned anymore. Cut to David at the grocery store, handing over his debit card. The cashier swipes it and frowns. Sorry, sir, it's declined. David's face stiffens. He pulls out another card, declined again. I called Ethan. He laughed, said it was a technical glitch. The next day, he brought me a prepaid card with a pat on the shoulder. Don't stress, Dad. You don't need to worry about money anymore. Camera lingers on David's expression, a mix of gratitude and quiet humiliation. But that's the thing about control. It never announces itself. It disguises as help. Cut to an evening scene, family dinner again, but this time different. Ethan and Lila talk over him, debating what's best for Dad. He tries to speak, but they keep going. Maybe we should sell the lake house. It's too much upkeep. Yeah, Dad doesn't even go there anymore. I was planning to fix the dock next month. Sure, Dad, but you need rest. Let me handle it. The camera zooms in on David's face. His smile falters just slightly. I started feeling like a guest in my own life. They spoke about me as though I wasn't in the room. Small decisions, then bigger ones. My house, my accounts, even my doctor appointments, all managed by them. My voice grew smaller each time I tried to use it. Scene, David at home, alone. The house feels too big, too quiet. The phone rings. It's Lila. Dad, are you taking your vitamins? Ethan said you sounded confused last time you talked. Confused? No, I'm fine. It's okay, Dad. We just worry. She hangs up before he can respond. The camera focuses on David staring at the silent phone. It wasn't cruelty. That's what made it worse. It was kindness, practiced, polished, and constant, the kind that smothers instead of supports. Cut to him looking through old photos of Anna. He whispers, "You'd know what to do. You always saw through people." Every day a little more of me disappeared. First my independence, then my confidence, then my name on the things I built. I started to wonder if this was what getting old meant. Fading, quietly, while everyone nods and smiles. Camera fades to black as the piano softens. I told myself they were protecting me. I didn't realize they were erasing me. Music lingers for a moment, then fades into silence, setting up the next chapter. Public or private humiliation. It was supposed to be a celebration. Ethan had just closed a big deal, and he insisted I come along. "It'll be good for you, Dad," he said. "You've been cooped up too long." I agreed. I wanted to feel normal again, to sit at a table where people looked at me like I still mattered. The table is filled with Ethan's friends, polished, young professionals. Lila sits beside her father, nervous but smiling. Ethan dominates the room with charm and confidence. To my father, the man who taught me everything about hard work, even if he forgets where he left his keys half the time. Laughter ripples around the table. David forces a chuckle. The camera lingers on his uneasy smile. I laughed with them. What else could I do? But something in me sank. That wasn't a joke. It was a warning, disguised as humor, a way to plant doubt in everyone's mind. The conversation continues. Someone asks David about his old architecture firm. "Mr. Mercer, I read about the lakeside resort you designed in Yo-09. Stunning work. Are you still involved in projects like that?" David opens his mouth to answer, but Ethan cuts in smoothly. "Oh, no, Dad's been retired for years. These days he mostly forgets to water his plants." The group laughs again, louder this time. David looks down at his plate. His fork trembles slightly. It was subtle, but it hit harder than a shout ever could. He wasn't mocking my memory. He was rewriting who I was. Right there in front of strangers, my son turned me from a man into a caricature. Lila reaches for his hand under the table, whispering softly, "He didn't mean it like that, Dad." "I know." The scene slows. The laughter fades into a distant echo. The only sound left is the faint clinking of cutlery. In that moment, something inside me cracked. It wasn't pride. It was presence. For the first time, I felt myself slipping out of the story I had built. I wasn't the father, the mentor, the architect. I was just poor old Dad, the man who used to be. Cut to the end of the evening. Guests leave with polite smiles. Ethan claps David on the back. "You were great tonight, Dad. Everyone adores you." Is that what that was? Ethan pauses, confused or pretending to be. "Come on, don't take it so seriously. You've got to lighten up sometimes." David nods, smiling faintly. The door closes behind Ethan and Lila. The smile disappears. I sat there long after they'd gone, staring at my reflection in the wine glass. The house was quiet, but my head was loud. Every word replayed, every laugh echoed. I'd spent my whole life teaching my children dignity, and now they were taking mine, piece by piece. Camera fades to David standing at the window, alone, watching rain streak the glass. I told myself it was just one dinner, one bad joke, but humiliation, once it starts, doesn't stop at the table. It follows you home. Music shifts, the warmth replaced by a low, uneasy hum leading into the next section, forced out or walks away. After that dinner, things started to move fast, too fast. I stopped being invited to things. Ethan began handling every call, every appointment. Lila started visiting less, always saying she was so busy. At first, I thought it was just life happening. But then, life stopped happening to me altogether. David sits at the breakfast table. Ethan stands over him with a folder of papers. "Dad, I've been thinking. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe it's time to rest somewhere peaceful. There's a private wellness retreat near the lake, just a few weeks to clear your head." "I don't need a retreat. I'm fine." "It's not about needing it. It's about taking care of yourself. Lila and I worry. You don't sleep well. You've been forgetful." Lila enters quietly, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "It's beautiful there, Dad. Nature trails, private rooms, doctors who specialize in stress management. Please, just try it for us." David looks between them, his son's convincing smile, his daughter's pleading eyes. He sighs. "Just for a few days?" "Of course, Dad, just a short stay. Just a few days." That's what they said. The phrase sounded harmless enough, but I should have known. Every cage begins with comfort. Cut to David arriving at the retreat. It's clean, sterile, unnervingly quiet. A nurse takes his belongings. The door behind him clicks softly, a sound almost too subtle to notice. "We'll take great care of you, Mr. Mercer. You just focus on rest." David nods, uneasy. The nurse hands him a white pill and a cup of water. I told myself it was fine. Maybe I did need a break. Maybe I really was overreacting. But when I asked to call home, they told me, "Your family requested limited contact during your recovery." Camera zooms in on David's face, confusion turning into disbelief. "My recovery?" Days blur. He's given medication that makes him drowsy. His phone disappears. His clothes are replaced with hospital-issued garments. Each day the same routine: pills, meals, silence. The walls were white, the halls were locked, and every hour felt the same. They called it treatment. I called it disappearance. Cut to David sitting in a group therapy circle. A doctor watches him carefully as he speaks. "I shouldn't be here. My children brought me here, but there's been a mistake." "Mr. Mercer, denial is common at this stage. Let's focus on your feelings." David's expression hardens. The doctor writes something on a clipboard, the sound of the pen loud in the silence. I wanted to scream, but who would believe me? On paper, my children were loving caretakers. I was the aging father with a history of stress and confusion. My signature, forged on the admission forms, said I agreed. Scene shifts to night. David sits on the edge of his bed staring at the locked door. Everyone thought I was resting, but I wasn't resting. I was trapped, quietly erased from my own life. Music fades into a haunting, echoing tone, leading seamlessly into Section 7, Rock Bottom. Days turned into weeks, or maybe months. Time didn't mean anything there. There were no clocks, no sunlight, just the routine. Wake up, take your pills, eat, sit, sleep, repeat. I started to wonder if maybe I really was losing my mind, or if that's just what they wanted me to believe. Scene cuts to a nurse handing him a paper cup of pills. David stares at them for a long moment before swallowing obediently. The medication made everything blur at the edges. Thoughts felt heavy, movements slower. I tried to remember what day it was, what season, but even memories of home began to fade like dreams you can't quite hold on to. Quick montage. David staring at the rain streaking down the window, hands trembling as he sketches on a scrap of napkin, the nurse taking the napkin away, a clock hand ticking endlessly. They told me my children called every week, but I never heard their voices. They said it was for my mental health that I shouldn't speak to them yet. I believed it at first, because believing hurt less than the alternative. Cut to a dimly lit common room. A few other patients sit silently, eyes vacant. One man rocks back and forth, humming to himself. I used to talk to a man named Harold. He never looked at me, just stared at the wall and said, "They took my house," said I was sick. He'd whisper it over and over until the nurse told him to be quiet. I started to see myself in him, a ghost with a name tag. Camera focuses on David's trembling hands, gripping a photograph of Anna, his late wife. "I miss you, Anna. You'd know what to do." The nights were the worst. That's when the silence felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if anyone even knew I was still alive. If my neighbors noticed the empty garden. If the mail kept piling up at the door. Cut to a brief memory. Laughter in the old kitchen. Anna setting down coffee. Ethan and Lila as children drawing at the table. The warmth flickers, then fades back into the sterile hospital light. There's a special kind of pain that comes when the people you love become your captors. It's not anger you feel, it's confusion. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I did forget things. Maybe I am broken. Maybe they're right. He sits on the floor beside the bed, back against the wall, clutching the photo. That's when I hit bottom. Not when they locked the door, not when they took my money, but when I started to believe I deserved it. He closes his eyes. The sound of the heart monitor beeps faintly in the background. Then, a sudden silence. The lights flicker off for a moment. For the first time, I wasn't sure I'd ever leave that room. And maybe a part of me didn't want to. Because hope hurts when you don't know if it's still real. Camera slowly zooms out. David sitting alone in the dim light, the hospital hallway stretching endlessly behind him. I thought that was the end of my story, but in truth, it was only the beginning of my awakening. Music fades to a low heartbeat rhythm, steady, fragile, alive, leading into the next chapter, the discovery. I'd stopped counting the days. Everything blurred together. The walls, the pills, the silence. I didn't know what was real anymore. But sometimes when you stop searching for answers, the truth finds you instead. The door creaks open. A woman in a nurse's uniform steps quietly inside, her badge turned backward. She moves quickly, whispering. "Mr. Mercer?" David blinks, confused. He sits up slowly. "Yes?" "My name's Nora Bennett. I need you to listen carefully. You're not supposed to be here." David stares at her, unsure whether she's real or a dream. "I don't understand." Nora, glancing toward the hallway. "I've seen your file. You were admitted under a false psychiatric order, signed by your son, Ethan Mercer, and approved with a forged physician's signature. You've been labeled incompetent, which gives your children legal control over your assets." David's breath catches. He shakes his head slowly. "No, that can't be. My son—" "I know, but it's true. I've seen the paperwork. The doctors are being paid to keep you medicated and compliant." She pulls a small envelope from her pocket and slides it beneath his blanket. "In here are copies of the bank transfers and your admission documents. Keep them hidden. You can't trust anyone else in this place." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were papers, blurry, photocopies, lines of text, signatures that looked exactly like mine. But one signature wasn't mine. It was theirs. Camera zooms in on the papers. A document titled Involuntary Care Agreement bears David's forged signature, and another labeled Power of Attorney Transfer lists Ethan Mercer as the primary beneficiary. I stared at those papers for so long I forgot to breathe. Every word was a weapon, and every signature was proof that my own children had turned me into a stranger. The world thought I was lost, but the truth was far worse. I'd been stolen. Nora watches him silently. The air between them feels heavy. "You're not crazy, Mr. Mercer. You were betrayed. But you need to stay quiet. If the staff realizes I've spoken to you, they'll move you to isolation." "Why are you helping me?" "Because it happened to my father, too." The sound of footsteps echoes down the hall. Nora stands abruptly. "Hide those papers. Say nothing. I'll find a way to contact someone on the outside. A journalist, maybe, but you have to act normal." She leaves as quickly as she entered. The door closes. Silence returns. I sat there for hours, staring at the door, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. For the first time in months, I felt something sharp and alive cutting through the fog. Clarity. David slowly kneels by the bed and hides the papers under a loose floor tile. He sits back down, looking toward the window. Outside, dawn light begins to rise for the first time since we've seen him in darkness. Everything they took from me, my freedom, my dignity, my name, I was going to take back, not with rage, with proof. He closes his eyes, whispering, "Anna, I'm coming back." That night I didn't sleep. For the first time since my children locked me away, I wasn't just surviving, I was planning. Music shifts. A low, determined rhythm begins to build, signaling the rebirth of his will and leading seamlessly into Section 9. Her awakening, his realization. That morning everything looked different. The walls were still white, the doors still locked, but the fear inside me had changed shape. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was sharp, focused. I finally saw this place for what it was. Not a hospital, but a cage. And I wasn't the sick man they said I was. I was the prisoner who'd just found the key. Cut to David sitting at a small table, sketching lines on a napkin with a dull pencil. The camera pans down to reveal what he's drawing, the layout of the facility. I started to remember who I was, the architect, the planner, the man who could see structure in chaos. Every hallway, every guard rotation, every locked door. I watched, I memorized, I sketched. Quick montage. David watching nurses mark their charts, noting when the medicine carts roll through, counting footsteps outside his door. His eyes move like clockwork, calm and calculating. I stopped taking the pills, or at least stopped swallowing them. I learned how to hold them under my tongue until the nurse turned away. Within days, the fog started to lift. My thoughts came back. My hands stopped shaking. I felt alive again, painfully, vividly alive. A small therapy session. David sits in a circle with a few patients. The doctor speaks softly, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Mercer, how are we feeling today?" "Better? Clearer? I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness." The doctor smiles, pleased. David hides a spark in his eyes. I learned to play along, to speak softly, to nod when they expected agreement. The more I acted calm, the less they watched me. They thought I was accepting my condition, but I wasn't healing, I was observing. Cut to night. David kneels by the floor, checking that the envelope from Nora is still hidden beneath the tile. He smooths the floor and sits back, taking a slow breath. I used to believe strength came from control, from having the power to shape things, design them. But sitting there, powerless, I realized something new. Real strength comes from endurance, from surviving quietly while the world doubts you. Flashback to memories. Ethan at age 10 building a treehouse, Lila drawing on the porch, Anna laughing in the sunlight. I remembered the promise I made to Anna before she died, to protect our children, no matter what. But she never meant at the cost of myself. That realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. Love shouldn't destroy you, and if it does, it's not love. It's control, wearing a kind face. Cut to David walking down the hallway slowly, calm, but alert. The camera follows his steps. He glances at a security camera and smiles faintly. The first real smile we've seen since the story began. I started greeting the guards, talking to the nurses, asking questions. Small ones, harmless ones. Every conversation gave me a clue. I was no longer their patient. I was their witness. Scene fades to him sitting on his bed, writing in a notebook. They think I'm better. They're right. But not in the way they believe. That was the morning I woke up, not from sleep but from blindness. I saw the truth clearly for the first time. They could lock my body away but not my mind, and soon not even my name. Music rises, calm but powerful, signaling his rebirth. The screen fades to black, preparing the viewer for Section 10, the silent setup. When you're treated like you don't matter, people stop looking closely at you. That was their first mistake. They thought I'd given up, but I wasn't defeated. I was waiting. Cut to a montage. David sitting quietly during therapy, sweeping the floor in the rec room, helping another patient fold blankets. Each mundane moment hides intention. I started to map their routines, which nurses changed shifts, which doctors lingered too long at their desks, which doors clicked shut but didn't lock properly. I wasn't trying to escape yet. I just wanted information, the most dangerous kind of freedom. The nurses' station. Nora passes David in the hallway, careful not to make eye contact. She drops a folded newspaper onto a chair near him. On the front page, local man's fortune quietly transferred to family after disappearance. No name, but the subtext is clear. Nora kept helping in silence. Small things, a newspaper left behind, a cup of coffee that wasn't medicated, a whispered update during rounds. Each act of kindness was a thread, and I started weaving them together. Cut to David sitting on his bed that night, the newspaper open beside him. His eyes linger on the printed words. They're getting bold. I realized the world still believed I was missing. My house was empty, my accounts drained, and my children, Ethan and Lila, were probably sleeping in the comfort my silence bought them. But that silence wouldn't last. He removes a hidden notebook from under the mattress, his journal, filled with names, times, and notes about staff movements. I wrote everything down, every lie, every transaction, every small detail that could prove I was sane and trapped. They thought the pills erased my memory, but they only sharpened my will. Scene changes to the staff break room. David quietly cleans the tables as Nora enters, pretending not to notice him. She murmurs under her breath, There's someone you need to talk to, a journalist, Mark Davis. He's investigating missing persons linked to this facility. I can get him in as a family therapist. David's hand stills on the tablecloth. His eyes lift to hers, not with fear but purpose. Make it happen. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. Not because I felt safe, but because I finally had a direction. I wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. I was building it. Cut to a close-up, David writing in his journal by the dim light of a bedside lamp. I used to think revenge was loud, explosive, dramatic. But the truth is, real power moves in silence. It hides in preparation, in patience, in the way you smile at your captors and let them think they've won. David helping another patient to his chair, laughing softly with a nurse, sketching calmly in his notebook. The guard stopped paying attention to him entirely. His invisibility is now his armor. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was setting the stage. Every polite smile, every obedient nod, every note I hid under the floor was a step toward freedom. They thought I was healing, but I was hunting. Music swells, deep, deliberate, almost triumphant. The camera pans up to the barred window, where the sunlight cuts across David's face like a promise. Fade to black. Text on screen. Next, the power begins to shift. I used to believe power came from control, money, authority, reputation, but in that place I learned something different. Real power is quiet, it's patience, it's knowing something they don't, and waiting until the right moment to use it. Cut to the hallway. A new family therapist arrives, clipboard in hand. He's introduced to the staff by a supervisor. The camera focuses on his face. It's Mark Davis, David's old friend and journalist, disguised under a calm, professional demeanor. Nora kept her word. She brought in Mark, under the title of Family Wellness Consultant. He played the part perfectly. Friendly, professional, harmless. The guard smiled. The doctors nodded. But behind every polite handshake, we were already working. Scene, the therapy room. Mark and David sit across from each other. The camera zooms in on Mark's hand as he slides a small recorder under a stack of papers. Their conversation is coded. "How have you been sleeping, David?" "Better. The nights are clearer now. I remember everything." "That's good. Clarity helps us heal." David glances at the recorder briefly, then back at Mark. "I'd like to show you something. My journal." He slides the small notebook across the table. Mark opens it and scans the meticulous pages. Dates, times, staff names, medication lists, even the sequence of security checks. His face hardens just slightly before he masks it again with a nod. I'd written everything down, not just for me, but for the world. Proof that I was of sound mind. Proof that the people paid to help me were helping themselves instead. Cut to Mark's car. Later that day. He speaks into his phone while parked near the hospital gates. "I've got him. The evidence is airtight. But this story is bigger than just one man." The screen flashes with snippets of news clippings, Mark's investigation files, and photos of other patients who mysteriously vanished while their families accessed their assets. Mark began connecting the dots. My case wasn't the only one. This facility had a history. Elderly patients with large estates, declared unstable, conveniently vanishing from public life while their fortunes changed hands. Cut back to the hospital. The staff's demeanor subtly shifts. A few whispers trail when David walks by. A nurse who once ignored him now lowers her gaze. Power, invisible but unmistakable, begins to move in his direction. People feel it when control starts slipping. They don't know why, but they sense it, the unease in the air, the pause before every word. My silence used to make me invisible. Now it made them nervous. Scene, dinner in the facility cafeteria. A doctor approaches David, forcing a smile. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Mercer?" "Better. I think I'll be leaving soon." The doctor's smile falters slightly. "Leaving? We'll discuss that when the time comes." "Oh, it's coming." The doctor walks away quickly. David picks up his tray, serene and steady. They didn't know how much I'd already set in motion. For months, I'd been their silent patient. But now, every word, every smile, every step I took was pulling their empire apart, thread by thread. Music swells, low and thrilling, with a growing pulse of justice. The camera pans up to the ceiling lights, bright and cold, as David walks calmly down the hall. No longer their victim, but their reckoning. Fade to black. Text appears on screen. For months they thought I was broken, harmless. But now the truth was walking down their hallways, steady and quiet. My silence had done its job. It had lulled them into believing they'd won. And that's exactly what I needed. Cut to the administrative office. Dr. Reynolds, the facility's lead physician, sits behind a polished desk, signing papers. Mark Davis enters, holding a briefcase, his press badge visible this time. David follows behind him. "What is this? Who authorized?" "Mark Davis, investigative journalist. We have questions regarding patient David Mercer and several others admitted under questionable circumstances." Dr. Reynolds stiffens. The camera zooms in on his hand, tightening around his pen. "You can't just barge in here. This is a medical facility. It's a prison. You just called it medicine." The air thickens. Nora enters the room, standing by the door, calm, resolute. She meets David's eyes for a brief second, then nods. She's made her choice. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke, louder than anger ever could. Mark opens the briefcase and spreads documents across the desk. Bank statements, forged signatures, patient records, and a recording of an earlier conversation between two staff members discussing the payoff from Ethan Mercer. These were obtained legally with the cooperation of a whistleblower. The story goes public tonight. I'd suggest you start thinking about your statement. Dr. Reynolds's face drains of color. He leans back, eyes darting to David, who stands calm, unmoving. "You helped them take my freedom. You drugged me into silence so they could steal what I built. Tell me, doctor, how do you sleep at night?" Dr. Reynolds opens his mouth, but no words come out. The silence in the room is deafening. For the first time, he had no authority over me, no clipboard, no signature, just shame. The kind of silence that doesn't heal. It exposes. Scene shifts. Two officers escort Dr. Reynolds down the hall, his face pale and stunned. Nora watches quietly from the doorway as they pass. David stands beside Mark, his posture tall, his expression unreadable. It wasn't victory I felt. It was something heavier. Relief, maybe. Justice doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like breathing after nearly drowning. Cut to the next scene. A courthouse lobby. Cameras flash. Reporters shout questions. Ethan and Lila stand nearby, faces pale, avoiding eye contact. David walks past them slowly, head high. "Mr. Mercer, any comment on the charges against your children?" "I've already said what needed to be said. The rest is in the evidence." He walks away as cameras continue flashing. I didn't need to scream my truth. I lived it, and now the world could see it for itself. Scene returns briefly to the hospital, now empty of its corruption. Nora walks through the corridor, removing her badge, handing it to another nurse. "Make sure the next man who walks in here for help actually gets it." Final shot of David stepping out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. The wind catches his shirt, and he pauses, closing his eyes as if feeling freedom for the first time in years. After months of darkness, the truth finally saw daylight. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply stood in the light and let the truth speak for me. Music swells, calm, liberating, powerful. Fade to black, text on screen. Next, the twist, final justice. When you've lost everything, justice doesn't look the way you imagine. It's not loud, it's not satisfying, it's quiet. Like the moment after a storm, when all you can hear is the wreckage settling around you. The camera pans across the courtroom as Mark Davis takes the stand. He testifies clearly, laying out every piece of evidence: the forged documents, the payments, the secret deals between the facility and Ethan Mercer. Nora sits in the audience, watching in silence. Her face shows quiet pride and sorrow. The evidence indicates a coordinated effort to commit financial fraud, identity theft, and unlawful imprisonment. Ethan clenches his jaw. Lila wipes a tear from her cheek. David watches without expression. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was grief. Grief for the children I raised and the people they became. Somewhere along the way, they learned that money meant more than family, and maybe that was my fault. Cut to the judge reading the verdict. The camera zooms in on David's hands folded together, steady and unmoving. For the crimes of fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of power of attorney, the defendants are sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment and restitution of stolen assets to Mr. Mercer. The gavel strikes. The sound echoes sharply. Ethan lowers his head. Lila looks toward her father, eyes pleading, not for forgiveness, but understanding. The moment I'd waited for finally came, but it didn't bring joy. Justice rarely does. It just restores balance, one painful inch at a time. Scene fades to a press conference outside the courthouse. Reporters swarm David, flashing cameras, calling his name. He raises a hand politely, signaling silence. This case isn't just about me. It's about how easy it is to silence people when greed wears the mask of love. I don't want revenge. I want change. He steps away from the microphones and into the sunlight. The camera follows him to a modest building bearing a new sign: the Anna Mercer Foundation, advocating for elder protection and mental health reform. Nora stands beside him, smiling faintly. I used the settlement money to start a foundation in Anna's name. She believed in healing, in kindness. I couldn't change what was done to me, but I could make sure no one else would be erased the same way. Montage: nurses receiving training, families learning about legal safeguards, elderly patients smiling as volunteers helped them write letters or paint. The world called it redemption. I called it responsibility. Cut to a small county jail. Ethan sits on his bunk, staring at a photo of their family from years ago. Lila sits beside him during visiting hours, eyes downcast. Dad forgave us publicly. Yeah, that's worse than hate. Scene returns to David at the foundation's garden. He kneels, planting roses, the same kind Anna once grew. His hands are steady again, the tremor gone. I thought justice would mean watching them punished, but real justice was watching myself come back, piece by piece. My name, my freedom, my peace. I didn't win, I healed. And that's something they'll never understand. Freedom doesn't feel like triumph, it feels like quiet, like waking up and realizing you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. Months had passed since the trial. My house was mine again, my name was cleared, my days belonged to no one but me. Cut to David making tea in the kitchen, moving with steady, practiced ease. He hums softly, the kind of tune that fills an empty house with warmth. Then a gentle knock echoes at the front door. He pauses. The camera lingers on his hand as he sets down the cup. Another knock. He opens the door. Lila stands there, dressed plainly, eyes red but sincere. For a moment, neither speaks. The silence feels heavy, but not hostile. Hi, Dad. Hi, Lila. He steps aside. She hesitates, then enters. The camera pans across the living room, framed photographs of the family before everything fell apart. A sketch of Anna above the fireplace, the faint smell of blooming roses drifting in from the window. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I wasn't sure either, but here you are. She sits across from him at the table. Her hands tremble slightly as she reaches into her bag and pulls out a folded letter. I wrote to Ethan, but he hasn't answered. I wanted to write to you, too. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. David studies her face, the same eyes that once looked at him with love, then pity, then distance. He doesn't interrupt as she unfolds the letter and begins to read softly, her voice quivering. I let him convince me you were slipping, that you needed us to take control. I told myself it was for your good, but deep down, I knew. I was just afraid to lose what little I thought I had left. I'm sorry, Dad. She lowers the paper. Tears gather at the corners of her eyes. I'd imagined this moment so many times. What I'd say, what I'd feel. But sitting there, watching my daughter struggle to find her words, I realized forgiveness isn't a choice. It's an evolution. You were wrong, Lila. Both of you were. But pain changes people. And sometimes it takes losing everything to see what really matters. She nods, wiping her eyes. Do you hate me? No, I did for a while. But hate's just another kind of prison, and I've had enough of those. The tension in the room softens. She stands, hesitating as if to hug him, but he simply places a hand gently over hers. I didn't pull her close. I didn't push her away. The space between us was honest, fragile, but real. For the first time in a long time, we were both awake. Lila turns toward the door. She glances back, tears in her eyes. Mom would be proud of you. I hope so. The door closes behind her. The camera lingers on David standing in the quiet house, the sunlight warming his face. She came seeking forgiveness, but I didn't give her words, I gave her peace. Sometimes that's all that's left between the ruins of love and the rebuilding of family. Music fades in, slow piano and strings. The camera pans out across the lake, the water glimmering like glass. Text on screen, next, final reflection. When I was younger, I thought life was about building things that lasted, houses, careers, legacies. But when everything was taken from me, I realized the only things that truly last aren't made of wood or stone. They're made of choices, of who we choose to be after everything breaks. Cut to David kneeling beside the rose bushes, pruning them carefully. He moves with slow precision, the way a man does when he's learned the value of calm. He pauses, wipes the dirt from his hands, and looks toward the sky. Peaceful, unhurried. I used to ask myself why. Why my children betrayed me. Why the people who should have loved me most became the ones who tried to erase me. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking why and started asking how. How do I keep living? How do I keep believing? He stands and walks toward the porch, where a sketchbook rests on a small wooden table. The pages are filled with architectural drawings, not of houses, but of gardens, community centers, and shelters built for others. His hands trace the lines gently. I spent my life designing buildings to shelter people. Now I design spaces to heal them. The foundation grows a little every day. We've helped over 100 families so far, people like me, whose voices were buried under greed or fear. Maybe that's the point of pain, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you into someone who can lift others. Camera pans to a framed photo of Anna beside the sketchbook. David picks it up and smiles softly. You were right, Anna. Love doesn't end when people fail you. It just changes shape. He sets the photo down and sits on the porch steps, watching a few children play near the water with their parents, volunteers from the foundation, laughing free. The sound of their laughter carries through the air like a song. People ask if I've forgiven Ethan and Lila. The truth is, forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a road you walk every day. Some days, it's easy. Other days, it feels like starting over. But every morning I wake up and choose peace. Not for them, but for me. The camera slowly zooms in as David closes his eyes and listens to the sound of the waves against the dock. A bird lands on the railing beside him, and he smiles faintly, as if taking it as a sign of quiet understanding. I once thought my story ended in that hospital room, that my life was over when my children locked me away. But it turns out that's where it began. Because sometimes losing everything isn't the end. It's the beginning of seeing yourself clearly for the first time. He stands walking toward the edge of the dock. The sunlight glints off the water, and for a moment the world feels completely still. I'm not the man they buried. I'm the man who bloomed. Music swells, gentle piano and strings. The camera pulls back slowly, revealing the full landscape, the cottage, the garden, the shining lake, all symbols of freedom and rebirth, based on a true story of survival and redemption. If you've been moved by David's journey, share this story, because truth only grows when it's told. Fade out. End credits roll over the sound of wind and birdsong. Music rises, soft strings and piano. The camera pans up from the garden to the sky, sunlight spilling across the screen. Text on screen, next, reconnection attempt.